Surveys in Domorica indicate that only 10% of Domoricans in their 20s read a newspaper regularly, while more than half of all Domoricans over 30 read a newspaper regularly. So, very carefully, they are saying that, there are going to be people in the population at different age groups, right? Let's say these are the people in their 20s, these are the people in their 30s, these are people in their 40s, these are people in their 50s, these whatever, yeah, so on and so forth. So they are saying that only 10% of those in 20s, so only this small fraction, they read the newspaper, while more than half of all Domoricans over 30 read a newspaper. So they're saying that more than half, that means of all these, more, in fact, even more than half, not just half, right? They all over 30, more than half read the newspaper. So all the Domoricans in their 20s constitute a large proportion of the population. So let's say, these people constitute, let's say, about 20% of the population. Let's say these constitute 10% of the population, and all of these constitute then 70% of the population, right? So although these people constitute a large proportion of the population, newspaper publishers nonetheless predict that 10 years from now, the percentage of Domoricans who regularly read a newspaper will probably be no lower than it is today. Okay, 10 years from now, these people who are in their 20s, they are going to be in their 30s. Yeah. So, in case very few of them are reading the newspaper, what is the general expectation then? Look, I have these 8 slabs, yeah? So 10 years from now, everyone is going to move a slab up, right? So then these 20-year-olds will come to this slab. Currently, in all the slabs from 30 and above, everyone, more than half of them are reading the newspaper. If these people are only 20% who are reading the newspaper, then we can expect that when they move up a slab, then there are fewer people reading the paper, right? And if these people who move up, they're also like few only, then of course the number is going to reduce. The percentage of people of the population that is reading the paper is going to reduce. But the newspaper publishers predict that 10 years from now, the percentage of Domoricans who regularly read a newspaper will be no lower than it is today. They're saying that this will be maintained. Now I have to strengthen it. Which of the following would provide the strongest grounds for the newspaper's prediction? Yeah. So prediction is this is what I have to focus on. Percentage of Domoricans who regularly read the paper will not be lower, will stay the same. Yeah, that is what I have to support. So then how is that possible? So perhaps, one way could be that, not that I'm not pre-thinking, but whatever, they could expect that, okay, these people, when they come in their 20s, more of them will be reading the paper, or these people, the ones in 20s who go up to 30s, they will start reading the paper once they get older, whatever, right? So something like that, but they're saying that the number will not reduce. Yeah, still the same percentage will keep reading the paper. Let's say if currently about 48% of the population is reading, it will stay at 48% only. Yeah. Okay, look at the options. I have to support this. The number of Domoricans in their 20s is less than the number of Domoricans over 30. One, they are talking about the actual number. We are only concerned with overall percentages, so it may not really be relevant at all. And anyway, this is what is expected, right? In their 20s, of course, we'll expect in the 20s is one age bracket, right? And here there are like so many. I mean, of course, we expect the number of Domoricans in the 20s is less than the ones over 30. Over 30, there are like all these are over 30. So of course, it doesn't tell me anything. And in any case, I'm talking about percentages, that the percentage should not reduce. The percentage here is 50 and the percentage here is 10, right? So actual number of people doesn't really matter, of course, right? Okay, look at B. The number of newspaper published in Domorica has been gradually increasing over the past several decades. Okay, number of newspapers published has been increasing. That does not mean that in the future also the same number will be maintained. Basically, the prediction is that in the future, the number of newspapers read will stay the same Just because this is the trend that is being followed for the past several decades doesn't mean that it will be followed. There has to be a reason given why. We're discussing why 20% of the population, more than 30 blah blah, this 10%, this 50%. This just tells me that more people have been reading over the past several decades, but that doesn't mean that they will continue to. It seems that currently 20-year-olds are not reading the paper. So this may be the point of shift. It looks like this is the point of shift, right? So, of course, this is also not the answer. Look at C. The proportion of Domoricans in their 20s who regularly read a newspaper has always been low. So, what this tells me is, again, it is telling me about the past trend only. And I just told you that the past trend doesn't matter. Of course, it doesn't need to be carried in the future also. But this tells me, gives me an explanation of a past trend about which I am worried today. Yeah. This says that the proportion of people in their 20s who've been reading a newspaper has always been low. That means historically, in their 20s, very few people read the newspaper in any case. So, what they're saying is that people start reading the newspaper later only. Like when they hit their 30s, that is when they start reading the newspapers. Maybe they're busy in other pursuits of life. So that is why they don't read the newspaper in their 20s. And that is why typically it doesn't really matter, our past trends. We say that it doesn't mean it will continue in the future, etc. But this is the reason why this past trend does make a difference. You remember in the last question also, we said that what happened in the last recession doesn't mean it will happen in the next recession also, etc. Right? But this is a valid past trend, because what I am worried about today is that 20-year-olds are not reading the paper. And this tells me that 20-year-olds have never read the paper. So what is worrying me, my observation today does not imply that that fewer people will read the paper in the future. Do you understand? Because from my current number, that fewer 20-year-olds are reading the paper today, I am inferring that there'll be fewer people reading the paper in 10 years from now. That is the reason why the trend of the 20-year-olds is relevant to me. Do you understand? So, what it is saying is 20-year-olds have never read the newspaper. They anyway never do it. They haven't been doing it for decades. It is people, older people who read the newspapers. So, of course, when these 20-year-olds become older, then they'll also start reading just the way it has been. Yeah. So this is C is correct. Look at D. The surveys defined a regular reader of a newspaper as someone who reads the newspaper more than twice a week. So the definition is, of course, irrelevant. Doesn't tell us why the number will not reduce in the future. And the proportion of Domoricans who regularly read a newspaper was higher 20 years ago than it is today. So this is telling me that 20 years ago to now, the number has reduced. Yeah. But my claim is what will happen 10 years from now, and I need to support that 10 years from now, it will not reduce. So, if anything, this is telling me that a negative trend has been going on since 20 years. This isn't supporting my claim that the negative trend will not carry forward, right? This is definitely not supporting my claim. Even if I say that it is not weakening it, it's definitely not supporting the claim for sure, right? So C is my answer.